Apologies.
We're sorry.
Cool, it's okay. And today I'm going to talk about submitting short stories and some tips for writing short stories to help you improve your chances to get your stories accepted by magazines and anthologies and in contests. All right, so let me get to my presentation. Here we go. Let me
Yeah, there's still the pop-up.
hang on a second. We'll get rid of that pop-up for you. It's on the other screen over here.
Right, not your screen.
Got it.
So if you went to, it's still up there. So if you just go to that window real fast, yeah, and click on there. I think.
Oh, for goodness sakes, show me. Show me. No, we are.
Yeah, we're doing it.
Hang on, I know what it is. It's this one. There,
Good.
that should do it. All right. We've removed the obstacles. Yay. Technology. And let's see here. There we go. All right, so I'm going to start out by talking about tips for writing short stories. And we're going to go with basic plot. Everybody probably learned basic plot in school. You learned exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and conclusion. Another way of looking at that is you have a character in a setting with a conflict who tries and fails repeatedly to solve a problem as conditions worsen until the character makes a final big effort to resolve the conflict. And then you end with some sort of a validation to let the reader know, and this is the end of the story. Okay? And that's overarching plot. Now, that will give you a solid short story, but that's not really enough to get you published. So you need to think a bit deeper. All right, to get your story to rise a little cut above. So the story needs to occur at a pivotal point in the character's life, in your main character's life. So if you're doing, say, a detective story, your detective may have lots of cases, and a lot of them are going to be very similar. A lot of them are going to be just, you know, a solid mystery, but they don't have any effect on your detective. You want to look at the cases that change your detective, where they learn something about themselves, where they make some sort of life-altering change. They need to discover something that maybe upends their point of view, their reality, or changes how they think. So while the detective is solving their case, you need to look at their inner life and their thoughts and how the case is affecting them in order to make your story stronger. Okay. So you need to figure out why that particular mystery was important to tell. Sure, they're solving a crime. So here's an example. A lot of people have read Sherlock Holmes, Scandal in Bohemia. It introduced Irene Adler. And we know from the beginning, from the narrator, from Watson, that this story is important because it changed Holmes. It changed his point of view. He had no respect for women, no interest in women. But after that, he referred to her as the woman. So the story is a solid story, but Watson chooses to tell this story of all others because it had a profound effect upon Holmes. It's a pivotal moment for Holmes. So think about it as more than just solving your mystery, as kind of weaving different things together, weaving the detective's personal life, with the story. So in that story arc, they're in the middle as the character tries to solve the mystery. Remember, they have to act intelligently and do the best they can with the evidence they have at hand. You don't want a character who advances simply by luck and happenstance. People prefer intelligent characters. That'll make your story stronger. Let's see, I said that already. So you can make the story even stronger if you can make the personal situation climax at the same point as the mystery climax is, but if you can't do that, that's okay. Sometimes you can do it in the validation at the end where the detective is talking about, okay, and this is how it ended up, and wow, I've just realized this. Or this is going to make me change how I move going forward. So depending on the pivotal point your character is facing, you may not totally resolve everything because there are a lot of things in life that if your detective is, say, an alcoholic and they decide they need to start going to AA, that's a great pivotal point. Obviously, it's not the problem solved, but it's a step forward. And for these pivotal points, everybody has multiple pivotal points in their lives. Moves, marriages, deaths, births, job changes, gaining a partner, losing a partner, losing a valued friend, gaining a valued friend. So you can think there are any number of things you can weave in there to make your character's life mesh in with that plot. So then a word on character development. Because you're writing a short story, the reader's only going to spend, half an hour with your character. Even if you don't like someone, if they have an interesting story to tell, you might be willing to spend half an hour with the character. So whereas in a novel, you need to work harder to make the person want to spend hours and hours with this character. With a short story, you don't necessarily have to do that. You just need to hook them and get them to go, oh, wait, I do want to know how this ends. So your main character doesn't have to be the most likable person in a short story. Let's see here. So remember, because your story is short, you don't have a lot of room for throwaway characters. Most short stories, shorts are between 1,000 words and 4,000 words. Long stories are 5,000 to 4,000 to 8,000 roughly. Most of the characters, they need to all be pretty well fleshed out. If they have a place in that story, then you need to make sure they have their own motivations and desires and interests, even the minor characters. Okay. Slide. Okay, on to setting. And I'm going through this pretty quick because the second half I'm going to go over our submission. And we can stop in the middle, and if you guys have questions, I can answer them. So because you're writing a short story, you haven't got room to go on and on about setting. You need to make it brief, make it vivid, make it come alive to the reader. And one of the best ways to do that is to consider looking at your setting always through the main character's eyes. So if the character sees something and they have an opinion about it, you can make that setting come alive by having the character express, oh, this place is dank and awful and dirty, and I hate being here. Or, it could be the best place in the world, shiny, sunshiny, lovely garden, but they hate the outdoors. So you develop your character that way, and you describe the setting at the same time. Don't forget, of course, to use all the senses, include smells, include heat, temperature for touch, include what the person is seeing, because you really have to ground your reader very quickly in a short story because you don't have room to develop. And the best way to learn how to do setting, how to do character development, and how to do any of these things is to read lots and lots and lots of short stories and see how other authors do it. Okay, so then I'm going to start looking at a little bit at submitting. Editors get very irritated if your document that you submit to them is not formatted properly. It's a very quick way to get your story ejected from consideration. So a lot of things, a lot of publications prefer getting either a Word doc or a docx, many just a doc. So you need to know how to use your Word program to create the file format they want and to create a clean looking document. So in Word, there's that lovely button that's a paragraph symbol that'll show you all your spaces, all your tabs, all your centering, everything. Hit that button before you submit and make sure your document isn't a mess of coding, because it makes it harder for them when they go to publish it. And it's considered unprofessional if you leave in a bunch of tabs, a whole bunch of enters, if you center by pushing the space bar. Don't do that. Use your Word program. Define your paragraphs through your Word program so you can tell it indent with, like, 0.3 or 0.5. Some magazines will tell you which one they want, but those settings are in there and you need to learn how to use them instead of hitting tab, because tab is pretty much forbidden. It messes with programming and creating all sorts of things. So they have to strip that out, and forcing the editor to have to strip out your errors, they're not going to want to do it. The story that takes them the least time to format and do what they want with, that's going to have an edge over the one that's a formatted mess. All right. Yes, and you can see there, what did I not say? Don't put 2 spaces between sentences again, not 1989. All right. So these are some submission guidelines for Black Cat Mystery Magazine. And if you look, you'll see they want characters with serious potential. They want occasional happy endings, because there are a lot of really dark stories out there right now. They want characters who are real and believable. And look at that next one, transformational stories where characters grow and learn and change because of the story. All right, then they want stories with plot twists. They want stories that take something we're familiar with and change it and turn it on its head. They want smart characters. There's that thing about not being lucky, make them smart. And again, the last thing, exceptional writing will make us take any kind of story. So you don't necessarily have to do all these things, but you must tell a good story. So does anybody have questions on the writing? That was a real quick, just tips to make your story better.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yes, I have written several short stories, and the 2 of them that I think are in fact the best are written from the viewpoint of a child, not a little baby, but a early teen. I'd like to consider submitting one or both of them. And I'm wondering, because some of the things you said in your very first statement about change and development, I'm wondering how you do that from a child's point of view, because these are almost more like memoir than a traditional, because I also write mysteries, none which have been published, but so I think your advice on those was spot on.
Okay, so
Children's short stories, I'm not real sure what you do.
okay, so she's asking how to make a character where the character is a child, where
And
you
they're
can,
not written for children.
and they're not written for children.
No.
Show a pivotal change or something. Well, children are growing and learning all the time, so it's possible they can come to an understanding that they didn't have before. At 6 or 7, children suddenly get a concept of life and death. So there are things that you can work in there. There's another way to do it. If you have read, Art Taylor wrote a story called The Boy Detective in the Summer of '74. And it's about a child who starts out to solve a simple mystery. Why is there a bone, a meat bone, a ham bone or something in the yard? And as he goes through solving that, he runs into all sorts of social situations from the 70s that he didn't have a grasp of. And the story is actually told by the adult looking back on the things that he now understands that he didn't necessarily completely grasp as a child. So that's another way you can do it. You can look at it from the adult point of view, telling what the child did, but with now the adult's understanding of it. And I recommend that story if you want to see how that's done. It's
I
Art Taylor,
do. I will
Art
read that.
Taylor, The Boy Detective in the Summer of '74, and it was nominated for several awards. If it didn't win, I'd be surprised. I think it did.
I will definitely read it because I have loved how Donna Tartt deals with writing from the point of view of a child in her novels, but
Mhm.
and they're long and the child definitely grows and changes. But I had
Yep.
wondered if 1,000 words, can you do that?
I don't know about in 1,000. You can, Art Taylor's story is more in the novelette range because it's maybe 9,000 or 10,000 words. But there are definitely ways to do it with a short story.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Anybody? No? Okay. All right, then we'll move on to submitting. So thousands of people submit work for publication every day, and most of those stories are not going to be selected. But you have to learn to take rejection because this is just how the process works. Learn to fail, pick yourself up, try again, and persistence is the key here. Stories may be submitted and rejected 20, 30 times before it's accepted. I've got one that was rejected 9 times, no, 2 that were rejected 9 times before they were published. Persistence is actually the key here. There are any number of people who are great writers and you wish their stories were out there, but they're afraid to submit. They're afraid of rejection. Don't be afraid of rejection. You will receive rejection letters. You will. It's just the way the process works. So don't be afraid of it. All right. When you get a rejection, resubmit. Go find another place to send the story. You may find a place immediately to resubmit, or it may take you a little while to see a call for some anthology that fits perfectly. So don't throw out a story just because it gets rejected, and don't panic that it's bad just because it got rejected. So remember, not all failure is bad failure. Rejections are good failure because you didn't leave that story in a drawer to never be seen by anybody. You are actually getting out there and submitting it. So think about this. Dyson, Edison, Formula 409. Formula 409 is called 409 because it was the 409th attempt to make something. WD-40 was the 40th attempt. The only people who achieve success on a large scale are those who risk failure. You have to risk failure and rejection over and over and over to succeed in publishing. Getting rejected is good because you're actually taking a chance and putting your work out there. You're learning and you're working at your craft. Okay? Okay. All right, what did I do? Okay, this slide is not changing. Oh, yes, it did. Did I go too far? Yeah, I did. Sorry about that, guys. All right, so this is an example rejection letter, so you cannot be afraid of rejection letters, and this is one I received. And you'll notice from this letter, they didn't call me horrible names. They didn't tell me I was a horrible writer. They didn't tell me the story was horrible, nothing like that. They're usually very polite. So again, don't be afraid of this. And here's another one. This is a basic letter from Hitchcock, and I've probably got, I don't know how many of these, many. So you can see they're polite. I think the most the roughest one I ever got said, sorry, yours didn't make the cut. That's okay. Okay, so,
May I ask you a question? about
sure.
Letters, how often do you see that?
Almost never. It's usually just yes or no. If I'll get to this when I get to acceptances, sometimes you get conditional acceptances, and that will have, we need you to change this, and this, and that. There are also a few sites out there where you can opt to get feedback, but usually it comes with a fee. And I don't usually bother with that, but you can if you want. Okay, so the other thing to remember, every editor is looking for a specific story to fit a specific niche in a specific magazine. It may be based on which story fits the right link. It may be which fits best with the stories they've already got. There may be absolutely nothing wrong with your story other than wrong time, wrong place. So that's why you just keep resubmitting, okay? All right, so let's talk about finding places to submit your work. There are aggregator blogs kept by different authors where they list, look at all these submission places, and there are links. And then there are websites that track things, and then there are submission websites that different magazines use. So there's publishedtodeath.blogspot.com, which is a writer's website, and they have by month all the different contests and things that are open in a wide variety of genres, from nonfiction and essays through romance to all sorts of things. And they'll also have contests with no fees. They'll have just pretty much all sorts of calls for submissions. The Grinder at diabolicalplots.com is one of my favorites. It's a site that tracks and identifies markets, and they're sorted by genre, and it's free, and you can use it to track your submissions. And they are wonderful in that because people use it to track their submissions, they give you a graph, a bar chart at the bottom of each market, telling you about how long it takes to hear back from each market. So I like it for that because you can get a general idea of when you're going to hear back. Okay, so Submittable. Submittable is it's business. They have everything from poetry and screenplays to magazines of all different kinds, literary through everything else. It's also a submission system. So a magazine that doesn't have their own submission system will use Submittable. They'll say, please submit through Submittable. And you'll find their description on Submittable, and you'll go through and you'll fill out the forms and you'll link the file however they want you to through the Submittable website. So it's both a way of searching for and locating places to submit stories, but it also has the actual submission process there too. Okay, Duotrope is a professional site for discovering where to submit. Duotrope, because it's professional, it charges fees. It's a lot like the Grinder. The Grinder runs on donations. Duotrope runs on you paying them for access to their information. But it's the same sort of thing. You can discover all sorts of places to submit there. All right, there's a guy named, well, the website's called Ralan, RALAN.com. And again, they sort different genres, different magazines by professional, semi-professional, token, and those are levels of pay. So professional pay is 5 to 8 cents a word. Semi-pro is less than that. Token is like a penny to half a penny a word, or maybe even just copies of the magazine as pay. All right, the other place you can look are writers' organizations. So I try to put in our newsletters different calls for submissions. So if you get our newsletter, usually there's something there at the end with calls for submissions that are coming up. The Short Mystery Fiction Society is free to join, and they have on their groups.io site a current file where it's got links to calls for submissions, due dates, links, and it's a lovely thing. I used it, and yeah, I'm a member of the Short Mystery Fiction Society, which they award the Derringer Award for short story and mystery fiction, and that process is actually starting right now. So if you were a member right now, in January, you can submit a story published last year for consideration for a Derringer Award, and the judging would go on in the next couple of months, and the awards would be announced in the spring. But all the other major writers organizations will have information on what, like Mystery Writers of America has what they consider acceptable publishers, and they have a list of publishers on their site. So check out those different sites if you're looking for information on ways to submit. Okay, so once you've found, dozens and dozens of places you could potentially submit your story, then you have to sort those options. So suppose you find 8 magazines that accept a story of the length you've written in the genre you've written, and you don't know where to submit it first. Start with the professional markets. They're going to pay you the best. And if they take it, yay! Then you've sold through a professional market and you've gotten paid. Don't start at the bottom, because if you've got a great story and you start at the lowest payment, then you may have missed out. So start at the top and work their way down. For contests and unknown markets, things you've never heard of before that you come across, research those very, very, very carefully. You need to check out, well, I'll get to that in just a second when it's on the next slide. But before that, I wanted to say for mystery magazines, professional level, usually you're looking at Ellery Queen, Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine. Those are Dell magazines. They have sister magazines that are science fiction, which are Asimov's and Analog. And those two, though they are sister magazines, they are looking for different things. You cannot submit to them simultaneously. You have to do one and then the other, but their niches are slightly different. Ellery Queen will usually get back to you in a month to 2 months. Hitchcock is currently taking, I think, around 480 days to get back to you, but they promise they read everything they get. So do know there's a wide range in how long it takes to hear back from these. Okay. So when I was saying about contests and things you haven't heard of, please be careful. There are a lot of scams out there. Just like you would if you were going to hire a plumber or somebody to work on your house, do some due diligence and check and make sure there are no complaints against the publisher. Check and make sure that they're not looking to rip you off, honestly. There are some where their submission requirements down there in the terms say they get your story whether they publish it or not, and they may not have to pay you. Yeah, you've got to be aware of what you're submitting to. I also recommend there are any number of contests out there that want you to pay submission fees. Some of them are legitimate contests. Not all of them are. Some of them are surviving on those fees that people are giving them. There are dozens of places you could submit that will pay you without having to pay a submission fee. So avoid submission fees if you want to do this professionally, because you can lose money and it's just not worth it, especially when your goal here is to get published and to make some money from that. So writer beware. is a site that you can find at the Science Fiction Fantasy Writers of America, and they post regular blogs on the latest scams going around targeting authors, the latest scam publishers, the latest scam editors, the latest any kind of scam. And it's interesting to see what's going on out there and to let yourself know what to be aware of. All right, so the best way to know what market that you should submit to is to read magazines from that market. So you've written a story, you think it's going to be a good fit. If it's an online magazine, they'll have stories available online. Go in, read several stories, and make sure your story fits, because that's another way to really annoy editors, is to throw things at them that don't fit what their genre, their taste in stories. If you're looking at a print or ebook market, buy one, read it, get a feel for the market. Let's see here. So yeah, as I said before about Hitchcock and Ellery Queen, they may be sister magazines, they may be mystery magazines, but you need to get a feel for what each of the editors prefers and what they're publishing. So let's see here, and yeah, you have to match your work to the tone and the niche of the market. So you've done all that. You've read some stories. You think you found a great market. Now it's time to read the submission guidelines. So all of these magazines, all of these markets are going to have guidelines online that they want you to follow. Simultaneous submissions means that you can submit the same piece to multiple places at once. A lot of markets don't want you to do that because they don't want to waste their time reading a story that's already sold someplace else. There are some that'll specifically say no simultaneous submissions. There are some that'll say simultaneous submissions allowed. Just please let us know if your story is accepted someplace else. Pay attention, because if you get accepted someplace and another place contacts you to say, hey, we want to accept your story, and it's already someplace else, they're going to be mad at you, and they're probably going to put you on their naughty list, and they're not going to want to see another story from you. So make sure you follow the rules. And yeah, send your best work. All right, so more submission guidelines. The vast majority of markets out there are going to ask, even if they don't say, even if they just say, submit your stories here, they're expecting you to be a professional and to know that the format they want for a manuscript is William Shun's. If you don't know William Shun's manuscript format, you can Google it. It's very basic information from about you, your name, your address, your professional organizations are going to go in the top left corner. You're going to have your title, a third to halfway down the page with your byline, and then your story starts. And then on the second page, you're going to have a header and the page number, and the header is going to be your last name and the title of the story. And it's a very simple thing, but go Google William Shun's and you can read it. Some of the places, for example, Sherlock Holmes, if you look at their website, they're very specific on word usage. There's like words that they tell you, don't put this in here. Don't do this for me. And their margins and their spacing, and it's a lot of hoops to jump through, but it makes it easier on them. And if you do all of that and somebody else doesn't, you've got a better chance of being accepted than the person who didn't, whose story is probably going to get ejected immediately. So then cover letters. Most sites are going to require some kind of a cover letter. The cover letter, let's see, usually includes the title of your work, the word count, your publishing history if you have any. If you don't have any, don't worry about it. You don't need to include it. Some kind of brief biographical statement. Some require this, others don't. That's the place to put your professional organization. So if you're in sync, you tell them, hey, I'm a member of Sisters in Crime. I'm in the Heart of Texas chapter. And that lets them know that you're someone who's taking things seriously and learning their craft, which again is a signal to them that you're someone who's doing things as professionally as possible. All right, so now you've done your cover letter, you found where to submit, you followed the guidelines. Some will tell you, please attach your file to an email at this address. Some will say, use the submission system. And I mentioned Submittable before. There are others out there. Moksha is one of them, or Moksha, I'm not even sure how to say that. But some of them will use third-party submission systems that will do automated replies. Like, so you'll push it through the system and you'll get an immediate email back, your story is received. And that's easier than waiting on an editor, seeing your story, going, oh, okay, I got to reply to that. And it's just, so a lot of magazines use those. Hitchcock and Ellery Queen both have their own submission systems that have tracking numbers, and you can go in and put your tracking number in and you can see story received, and you can see if it's in progress or if it's rejected. It's just a different system. You just have to follow whichever system they've got. And again, make sure you've got your file format correctly. A lot of them will say .doc only, not .x. Or they'll say, we will hang you if you send us a PDF. I mean, there are few that are very, very specific about what formats they want. Make sure you've got that format, because you could sit there and you could try and submit. Let's see, it used to be, there was one site, I was sitting there and it wouldn't attach the file. I couldn't figure out why it wouldn't attach the file. And then I looked and it was trying to attach a .docx instead of a .doc, and the system wouldn't even take it. So pay attention. All right. So after you've submitted your work, then what? What do you do next? You get to write your next story and submit it. Don't worry about it anymore. It's off, it's done. Some markets out there, and they irritate me, but they don't respond at all if they don't want your work. And the only thing you can do there is email them after a certain period of time and say, hi, I have not heard a response on this. Are you still considering my story? And you'll get an email back, no, we're not considering, thank you for submitting. But they won't do that unless you ask. So there are a few of them out there like that. A lot of them will tell you in their submission guidelines, please expect to hear from us after 12 weeks. Please don't contact us or query us before that. If it's beyond 6 months, then please query us. Or they'll have a note in there in their submission guidelines for the point at which you should contact them to make sure something's still in progress. I've seen sci-fi venues, markets respond in less than 8 hours with a rejection of a story. They're very, very, very quick. And I have been assured by other people that someone has actually looked at this story, that they're just that on top of things. I don't know whether to believe that or not, but for whatever reason, my story didn't fit what space they had, didn't fit what they were looking for, whatever, fine. It was quick. Now I can submit it someplace else. So just don't be shocked if it is really quick. You may not have done anything wrong. That just may be how they work. So, as I said, some post response times, some don't. I've heard some fun stories about The Strand. So The Strand is a very old mystery magazine, first published Sherlock Holmes. And they're pretty famous for their lack of response, where I've heard stories of people who are like, man, I submitted to them 2 years ago and I've already published that story and I thought they didn't want it. And finally they contacted me. So they're very unpredictable. And if you've decided you're not going to hear back from them, email them, say, hi, are you still considering this? You may not even hear back from that, though. I don't know why. It's just one of those things we get to put up with. All right. So for those response times, I mentioned earlier, the grinder at diabolicalplots.com. They're usually very, very accurate on their response times. And they give you a good idea of not just the response time for rejections, but the response time for acceptances, because there can be a difference. They may reject very quickly, but an acceptance may take double that time. So you can go look and go, oh, look, I'm beyond where everybody else has been rejected. Yay, maybe. But it's a good resource. All right, let's see here. So you've submitted your story and you hear back and they say, hi, we think we'd like to publish your story. And you get up and you do a little happy dance, yay! And then you look at the rest of the email and they tell you, if you do some changes, we might want you to just publish your story. So it's not a complete acceptance, it's a conditional acceptance. And they say, please look at this scene, please consider changing this or whatever. I had an editor tell me to add more conflict to the climax ones. Same editor also said, and this was a sci-fi story, that the angle of refraction of the material I used for something in the story wasn't appropriate and was not going to be transparent. So it was a very technical detail. And so I, of course, changed that and resubmitted to the editor and got back an acceptance, and the story was published. But you have to be willing to read through what the editor wants, figure out how to solve the problems the editor has mentioned, because they don't always tell you how to solve them. That one with the right angle of refraction, he recommended instead of giving a chemical composition for what I was creating, just make up a fake name for it. Making up a fake name is really hard because I sat there and I thought of names and I Googled them and they all already existed. I think I ended up with a 6-syllable word to find something that didn't already exist somewhere out there for the substance I was using. So a really good editor, they're going to ask questions, they're going to mark things, they're not going to change things for you unless they are minor things. You use this word twice here and here, and they may mark, I'm changing this word because of this. They'll tell you why they're doing it. They want your voice, your story to come through, not their voice. So they're going to want you to do the work, not them. Okay? Yes. All right. Let's see here. Oh yeah, once everything is finalized, you'll get sent proof sheets of the story to review to make sure everything looks good, and be sure and go through and do a last run through, make sure you didn't miss one letter here or one letter there. And if you want, you can even compare it to your other story and make sure a line didn't get dropped or anything like that. Usually doesn't, because as I said, they want everything formatted so it's easy to move to their publication format. But be sure and do that. It's your job. Okay. So when your story gets accepted, you are not selling your story. You are licensing it for publication, and you are keeping your copyright. So your story is intellectual property, and as property, it has value. In creating it, you own it. It is yours. You have the copyright, and you get to decide how you want to license it. So you can license it for print publication. You can license it to somebody out there who's doing a podcast, and it's not going to be printed, but it's going to be a podcast, and it's going to be only in audio. You can license it multiple times for different things. So keep that in mind. You want to hold on to as much of your copyright as you want, as you can, That's one of those scammy things to look out for if anybody wants to see our entire copyright for a very, very, very long time, because that's very unusual for short stories. Most short stories venues have very limited times that they want to keep hold of exclusive use of your copyright. So copyright is yours from the moment you create your work, but you can't claim damages if somebody profits from your work without your consent unless you register the copyright. So if you're going to say self-publish your story and you put it out there and somebody takes it and uses it in their work, you can't get damages unless you've registered your copyright at copyright.gov. There's a small fee for that. If you're in a magazine frequently or in anthologies, frequently some of those are registered for the work itself. But for your copyright, you need to make sure you're responsible for it. And you can go to copyright.gov and register your story. So the only time you don't own your copyright is in work for hire. So if somebody contacts you and said, hey, we'd like you to write a little article about this, that, or the other thing, and we need it to be this long, and we need it by this date, and we'll pay you this much, and that's work for hire, and they've told you what they want in it, chances are, you look at that contract, they're going to own it and not you. So work for hire is different than, but it's out there. So there are people who do tie-in novels. So you watch a movie and they hire somebody to write a tie-in novel for that series, that movie, those characters. The person who does the writing doesn't own those characters, doesn't own that world. The way that they are paid and how the copyright is held is completely different. So just so you know. All right. So when you license your intellectual property, you're granting someone else the right to use your work for a set period of time in exchange for money paid to you. Usually with a short story, you're licensing a print or digital format of publication. There are some markets out there that'll also request audio. And I'm going to show you some of what that wording looks like. But remember, how you license your story can be limited only by your imagination, because there are lots and lots of ways to market things. So just for y'all to think about, video games. Stories are used in video games. Stories are used in board games. Stories are used in audiobooks. For television shows, movies, short features. There are foreign language translations, which is separate copyright. Maybe in a podcast, which is a form of the audio. Maybe as toys, as lunchboxes, as theme park rides if you're Harry Potter. So all of these ways are ways to license your story out there in the world, your characters out there in the world, which is why, back to those contracts, you need to make sure you know what you're signing when you sign a contract. Okay. So magazines, online sites, and publishers will send you a contract, and it'll tell you how long they want exclusive use of your story, meaning they're going to put it in a print format. You can't send it to anybody else and have them put it in a print format during that exclusivity period. Some of them, they want non-exclusive rights. They're going to put it on their website, and as soon as it's up, or as soon as it's in their digital issue that goes emailed out, then you're free to reprint it. They only want non-exclusive rights. Pay attention, because reprints are a thing and you get paid for them.
A question.
Yeah.
So Nora asked, if you register a copyright, you make edits or revisions, but still protected.
Yeah, usually. You can look
Like
at,
a certain percentage.
there might be, you can look at online. because there's a way to register drafts, believe it or not. And she would have to look up on the copyright.gov for specifics, because or consult an intellectual property lawyer, because I'm not one. Okay, so here's some examples. It's for an anthology. They'll tell you first world English rights. So they don't want Italian, they don't want French. You've still got those foreign language rights. After the official release of the anthology, all rights revert to the author and they won't publish it again without your permission. So they don't want even exclusive rights to it for any set period of time. It goes back to you. First means it's the first time it's ever in publication anywhere, ever in print anywhere. Generally speaking, if you've put it on a website somewhere, you've already lost first publication rights. You can't sell them again. So there are a lot of places out there that want you to put your work up for comment. Those count. You can't do that. Here's another example. This one, they'll send you an agreement that must be signed and they'll pay you by PayPal, and they want first publication and archival rights with an exclusivity period of 1 year. That's pretty typical. That means you can't reprint it anywhere else for at least a year. After that, you can look for someplace who wants to reprint stories. Another one, very simple statement. If you want to know more about publishing, the Science Fiction Fantasy Writers of America have intro to publishing contracts on their website, and you can go review that. This number might not be right anymore because they keep changing it, but a lot of things, your copyright may last for your life plus 70 years. So provided you hold on to your copyright, somebody could contact your heirs and say, hi, we'd like to reprint your story. We'll pay you this much, because it's property that transfers, it's inheritable. So hang on to your copyright, people. Okay, and I'm going to take you, I'm going to see, are there any other questions right now? And I'm going to take you to see some other things here in a second.
Got a question.
Yes.
Are there any that you need an agent to submit on the short stories?
It's pretty unusual. He asked for those of you online if there's, if you have to have an agent to submit. No, typically not. You just find the submission guidelines online, follow the rules, send in your story. If you have any issues with understanding anything, I'd go to an intellectual property lawyer before I went to an agent. Okay, so I'm just going to see here.
I have
Anybody
a
else?
question.
Yes.
Yes, some of us in the group publish in something 4 times a year called the West End Writers. It is a publication from our library. Would that mean if we've had a story in there, we can submit it for another short story? However, we need to tell them it's been printed. Is that what the procedure would be?
Yes, yes, you would only submit it to places that accept reprints. Their submission guidelines would say we accept reprints. if they don't want reprints, a lot of them will say, we only want new unpublished stories, and you wouldn't be able to submit it there.
Okay, even though this is not something we pay.
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't
It-
matter,
it's
okay.
disseminated out there in print somewhere, then that
Okay.
first publication.
Thank you.
Yes. Anybody else? Yes.
The first one is, why do you write short stories?
I've written 4 novels and a lot of short stories, and writing novels for me is a painful slog. It's fun. It's fun. I find the format fun. There are a lot of people, it's a very good length for my brain. There are people who do both. There are people who only do short stories and never write novels. I find that it's just what's good for me.
Okay, so two on.
Yeah.
What about sites like Medium?
Medium. No, I'm not coming up. I'm drawing a blank. So tell me.
Okay.
What it
it's
is.
just An online, I have an author friend who basically does publishing with them, and you can do free articles, and then she helps you with them. So you've had that experience, that's fine. And then finally, a nitty-gritty question, I've only published for 2 magazines, so I only know what the rates are for those 2. What range you were looking at? Everybody always wants to know this, but no one wants that.
Okay. There are places out there that'll pay you in a copy and the hope of what's it called?
Publicity.
Yeah, or that kind of thing. There are places that'll offer the potential. The word is completely gone. Shoot, somebody help me out here. It's you've got a contract, you get an advance, and then it earns out, and you get money afterwards. Royalties. Thank you. I'm drawing a blank. Sometimes these words just go out of my head. But yeah, so some will pay you maybe $10, and you'll have the hope of royalties if it makes out. Some of them will only pay you $10 with no royalties. Some of them will pay you by the word, up to 8 cents a word. I've seen 10 cents a word. Certain contests will be higher, up to maybe 25 cents. There's a huge range.
Yeah.
It's a very, very wide range. Okay, let me show you where you can find some of that range. So I may need some help here from Maureen to switch to another screen. So give me just a second. Let's see if we can get this. Whoops. Up there. There we go. Can my people online see this or no?
So what
All
we're
right.
gonna do is you go back down to Zoom,
All right, hang on a second, people.
say share screen, and then you can choose. Say,
Not up there.
It's the one that says the yeah. Where the white brown.
Oh. Okay,
yeah,
there we go. Share. Thank you so much.
and then you can choose a different, yeah. Yep, we're good.
All right. So that website I was mentioning, the submission grinder, that's the place to search and find and track all sorts of fun things. This is it. They're run off donations, so you don't have to pay anything. It's free to use. You can see there at the bottom, they've got recent rejections and acceptances. They've got recently added markets where people have contacted them and said, hey, here's what I'm looking for. And they add the link to their website. They've also got this section called My Market Response List, and I'm logged in right now. So you can see responses to things that you've submitted to. If they are highlighted, that means they're beyond, they were submitted after yours, and you still haven't heard back, which that's what that's telling me. So up here on search, advanced search fiction, look at all the lovely categories. You can choose to sort by. So suppose you want to submit, you're looking for mystery and crime stories. If you know your word count of your story, you can put it here. If you don't, that's okay. You can put a minimum pay in if you want. You can learn a response time if you want. Qualifications are, well, you can read what they are, whether they're recognized for certain awards as a professional market. You can check whether they accept reprints, whether they accept translations, whether they accept simultaneous submissions, whether they accept multiple pieces at the same time. You can sort by pay scale or by response days or by alphabetically by the name. I like to sort by pay scale because it gives me an idea of what the highest paying are out there. Down here at the bottom, you can ignore certain markets. You can not see temporarily closed ones. You can get rid of fee-based ones. They automatically remove for you the ones that are closed permanently, the ones that are temporarily closed, the ones that are fee-based, or the ones that make you get a newsletter. You can uncheck those boxes if you want to see those markets. I like to uncheck temporarily closed. A lot of mystery markets only open for a few months at a time. And if you don't know when they open, then you may never see, oh no, it's coming open, you may miss the window. And over here, if you've got stories already submitted and you keep it tracked here, it'll exclude any markets that you've already got something submitted to because you can't submit to the same market at the same time. So I'm not going to fill in that word count, and I'm going to show you what happens when it comes up with mystery. So it takes a second to find it, and I don't know how long it'll take in the Wi-Fi here, but it should be just a second. Come on, you can do it. There we go. Okay, so scroll down, and you have a whole bunch of temporarily closed markets, and these are not just short story markets, these are also novel markets. And these are markets with open submission calls, so you wouldn't need an agent to submit your novel to them either. You can see how much they pay right there. That one at the top, the second one, Mystery Writers of America, runs a contest every year for unpublished novels. And you see that LD, limited demographic. That means for some reason there's something limiting on there. In that case, it's got to be your first story. You can't be published already. Some of these others that are limited demographic, that Pride Quarterly, I'm pretty sure is LGBT. New Visions Awards, some of those tend to be, you have to be under the age of 25 or you have to be under the age of 30. Other limited demographics may be, you have to live in Canada, you have to live in New Zealand. So you have to take a look and see why the demographic is limited, but they tell you if there is something limiting on there. Now, some of these, it tells you the average response times. Some of them say no data. That one's currently temporarily closed, so that's okay. Take a look at Hitchcock. So they tell you basic description up there at the top. They give you a link directly to the Hitchcock website. They give you a link directly to the guidelines on the Hitchcock website. They tell you what length stories they'll accept. So flash stories are typically 0 to 1,000 words. This one's got short story as 1,000 to 7,500. I've seen it. The definition varies depending on the market. Novelette, this one's got it 7,000 to 12,000. I've seen it up to 15,000, just depending on the market. Do they take electronic submission? Yes. Postal, old style stamps? Yes. Multiple submissions? No. Simultaneous submissions? Yes. Originals only. And they put this information here for you so you can have all of that important things right at your fingertips. Now here down at the bottom is that data that I love. because I like to know what I'm getting into. They show people who bothered to put in their information. And so not everybody does, but a lot of people do. And you can see where things are submitted and who's heard back and that sort of thing. But the other thing you've got here, look at the max waiting days on that one. 442. That's how long they're taking on average to respond right now. We can go back.
About 182 is how long they were taking on average.
442 is the average to hear back a response on your story. Okay, so go back over here and we'll find maybe Ellery Queen. You can take a look at that one. So they take flash stories of 250 to 1,000. You've got their pay listed, and then down here, that one says 285 days max, but the average there is 48. The Hitchcock average was much longer. That's how it works. You can see their turnaround response. The vast majority of people are going to hear back in a month to 2 months. Most of those are going to be rejections. Acceptances frequently take longer because of that editing process. You'll be told, we might take this, but you need to work on this or that. So it takes a while longer to see an acceptance. There are some where you won't see, where you'll see that same thing even without hearing back. I've got one out there somewhere right now. The acceptance is way far out there. The rejection is very quick. And I'm like smack in the middle and haven't heard anything yet. That's just how it goes. So you can have your own account. You can have a dashboard. You can manage your submissions on it. So manage pieces. I'm going to show you some of my pieces. It's just going to be titles and word count and how many times it's been submitted. And you can tell it, show me only the ones that are ready to submit and are not currently submitted anywhere. And that's how many are not currently submitted, because I try to keep mine out there. And how many times they've been submitted. So it helps you keep track of things, right? So back to this screen.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So you're loading it into the grinder and that's
Nope.
how it knows it's not, that you have not, so.
I tell it it's submitted.
Oh.
They don't have the story. All they have is,
When you're loading, it's not been submitted, but I've written it into the grinder.
right, I've written this piece, it's this long. It's this category, and that'll help them search for matches for it.
Oh,
Yeah. Because from that submission screen, you can run a search specifically for that story, for that length. And it'll find just the markets that are taking that length. And it makes it easier to find the ones that are accepting the stories you want. Okay, so what else could I show you? Yeah, there's a dashboard which shows everything over time. You can load or not load as much data in if you want, as you want. You can load in whether you got paid or not. You can load whether it's ready to be reprinted, and it'll help you find those reprint things. And as I said, it's free to start an account, unlike the other one, Duotrope. But I find it very handy. Any other questions? Yes.
When during the process should you register your copyright?
Well,
Yeah.
that varies from person to person. Mine that I self-publish, as soon as I self-publish them, I register them. Ones that are published by somebody else, I may not have done it yet. If I get interest in it from something beyond a print thing, ever, like, I don't know, if somebody wanted to make it into a TV show, we use it as a TV show. then I would make sure I absolutely went in and had it before I did anything, you know. So it's a range, and it depends on when you want to do it. You can do it immediately as soon as you finish writing it if you want, but it's yeah, it's entirely up to you. You don't have to worry about having it done before, while you're submitting, though. They're not going to steal it. Legitimate magazines are not, they've got way too many coming in. They're not going to steal it. You don't have to worry about that. Does that make sense? Okay. So yeah, kind of comes down to personal preference. Anybody else? Huh?
When you finish,
What?
when you finish it,
When you finish it, yeah, you can submit it then for copyright if you want. Anybody?
You said that, I think you said you published 7 last year.
Yep, 2 were reprints, 5 were new. Thank
How
you.
many, so that's 7 out of 7 or?
Ooh, heck no. So, okay, so if I were someone like in the mystery world, John Floyd, the man probably published 50 short stories last year. Yeah, and there are enough markets and enough places for you to submit that you can do that. And you have to also remember, by the way, I sorted this by mystery and crime. That's not going to show you the Saturday Evening Post, for example, which would accept a mystery story. So there are other markets out there that you can find if you go look under general that you might want to submit to. But what was I saying? Yeah, John Floyd, 50 stories last year. Me, I started focusing on short stories exclusively in 2020. So it's only been 2 years. I published, self-published some in a series before that. And I published one 10 years ago in analog science fiction, in fact. And, but I was kind of doing, after that, I was just haphazard about it. I would see something and I think, oh, I might want to submit to that. So in 2020, what I did is I decided to be more methodical about it. And I started setting goals for myself for how many stories I would write per year, how many submissions I would do per month. So in 2022, I set a goal of 3 submissions a month. And that's finding the market, writing this, making sure the story matches everything, making sure the length is right, getting the story written even, and sending them in. I probably, of those stories I submitted, I met my goal. I submitted 36 stories, not counting some others. I'll tell you about them in a minute. And I've probably got 10 or so of those still pending.
And that 36 includes some resubmissions.
Yeah,
Correct?
yeah.
That's not 36 stories. It's-
no, but I probably have that many. I know I do, in fact. So it's a process of persistence, because remember, some of those stories were on their 9th submission by the time they got accepted, because you have to hit the right editor and your story has to fit with the other stories they've accepted for whatever issue in, you know, whatever tone at the right moment. So it really, really, really is a game of hit or miss. And it requires extreme persistence. If you give up after a few submissions, you're not going to succeed. So the other thing I did last year for the first time, professional goals, yay. If you get published, then your stories are eligible for consideration for the best of magazines. So like Best American Mystery and Suspense and things like that. And if you have a story submitted, you can submit to that and they will consider it for that. And that's important to do because you should be responsible for taking you should be responsible for your own career. The same as if you never put a story out there because you're afraid of rejection, if you don't send a story in for a reward, then an award, it may never be considered. So did that for the first time. Usually those have to be in by December 31st of the year the story was published. Any other questions?
I'd
Yes.
like to ask about this. I used to write short stories, and I had some published, and 3 of those were mysteries, they've all been published. And eventually then I got into novels, and so I self-published some of these short stories.
Yes,
What would happen if I tried resubmitting?
you would have to, okay, so her question for those of you online was she's written some stories, she's self-published them, and she wants to know if she could resubmit them. So what she would have to do is choose the markets that accept reprints,
Yeah,
and they would consider them for publication.
even though they're currently available.
It depends on the market. They may ask you to take it down for a year if they,
Publish it.
right, it depends on what their exclusivity requirements are.
Okay.
If it's non-exclusive, they may not mind at all. Anybody else? No? Okay, well, it's 3:22 and we have to end by 3:30. So if you guys just want to talk for a few minutes, we're good. All right, let me see here if I can. Yes,
Well, I just read your Black Cat mystery story.
yes.
Thanks.
Oh, well, thank you.
Highly recommend.
So yeah, my stories, I should say. I can show you that. Give me a second. I did bring some of them with me. So Black Cat Mystery Magazine, have one in there. This one came out in August. Mine's a Christmas short story. Crimey Copia, Say What Now? It's I have a historical short story in there set in the 60s. Groovy Gumshoes, Private Eyes in the Psychedelic 60s. I have one in there. And it's set here in Austin on the same day with the crime happening concurrently with the tower shooting in 1966. And this one is an anthology collected from their ethics and philosophy stories. So a lot of crime stories, you'll find there are ethical questions in them. That's another place to remember, oh, this market may not be a mystery market, but they might take a mystery story. So that's how that one ended up in there. Anything else?
I
Questions?
did have one other
Yes.
question. When you're resubmitting a story after rejection, is it worthwhile to make revisions to tailor it to the new market?
It might be better. to look for- Oh, I'm sorry. He's asked if between getting if you get a rejection, should you revise before resubmitting it someplace else in order to tailor it to fit the new market? I would be more inclined to look for a market it fit as it was. Because as I said, remember the 90 whatever % of the time, there's nothing wrong with your story. You just didn't fit the editor's needs at that precise moment. So if you want to reread it and see if you see something that you might have missed the first time, go for that. But you don't necessarily have to do revisions in between. You can just send it back out in the world. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody else? No? Okay. Yay.
That's fantastic.
So let me see if I can say hi, Sherry, Nora, and Susan. Got it. I turned them off so they wouldn't be on my screen. So next month we will have Stephanie Krimmel. Can you remind me of the program we're going to be talking about?
Sure, I'm going to talk about using, I guess, the question about plotting versus dancing.
Yes.
So I was going to discuss one way to use software to help plot. But we can also have a discussion about pros and cons of plotting with campaign as well.
Okay, for those of you who can't hear that, she's going to talk about some software that she uses to help her plot. And we can talk about plotting and pantsing and the pros and cons of each. And if y'all want to talk about what software you use, if you do, that would be great. I can tell you with short stories, I very rarely plot. With novels, I start writing, go back, create a mild outline to see where I've gone, kind of get a general direction on where I'm going next. Right till I get to about 2/3 of the way done, maybe 3/4, figure out who did it, go back, insert what I need to make everything flow. I'm not a great plotter, and a lot of my short stories, because they are short stories, I can usually hold the whole thing in my head. Most of my stories are between 4,000 and 8,000 words. And that's not a huge length to be able to just sit down and write. Yeah, all right. Thank you very much. I'm glad you guys came to listen.
Thank you so much.
I'm gonna take this off.
Okay.